Hi, it's Father Paul again from St. Mary's Parish in Portland. Today we're celebrating the fourth Sunday of Lent, Sunday of joy, a Sunday of celebration and looking forward to the coming of Easter. Now, I realize it's probably not very joyful for most of us. We're stuck. We're kind of have this cloud over us, this shadow of the coronavirus and the COVID-19 disease outbreak. Here in Portland, we're not doing bad, but we've had a couple of people who are infected, and it's tough. It's tough for everybody. Also, what are we looking forward to? We're looking forward to the celebration of Easter. Kind of. I don't know. Well, I do know. We're not going to celebrate Easter in the church, but we can celebrate Easter here online, and we can celebrate Easter in our hearts. You know, it is the celebration of the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, and it's a sign for us of God's overarching love for us, God's intervention in our lives, God's assurance and protection. Even if we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, it says in Psalm 23, we fear no evil because God is with us in Jesus Christ. God finds a home, finds a presence in our lives. It's interesting because today the gospel for the celebration of the Fourth Sunday of Lent is taken from the 9th chapter of the Gospel of John. It's the story of Jesus and the man born blind. He encounters this man who was born blind. And Jesus is going to heal him. Now, Jesus heals him in a strange way, in a way that's different. Jesus, he spits on the ground. He makes mud from the spit, and he smears the mud on the blind man's eyes, and then he tells him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. The man goes and he washes the mud off his eyes in the pool, and he can see. They're finding fault with Jesus for doing. Who are they? They are the Pharisees. The Pharisees they play an important role in Jewish society. They kind of make sure people keep the laws. What do we mean by the laws? We mean the commandments, the 10 commandments, the commandments of Moses, the 613 laws that prescribe behavior for the community. And in the law, it says that if you keep the law and all the commandments, God will bless you, and you will have prosperity, good health, you will have security in your borders, you will have freedom from your enemies, you will win the victories. In other words, it's a pretty good, lots of children, you'll have lots of children. But if you break the commandments, you won't have security, you won't have prosperity, you won't have lots of children, you won't have victory over your enemies. In fact, your enemies will have victory over you. You won't have good health. And so the Pharisees are trying desperately to get people to obey the commandments, because right now, in the time of Jesus, they did not enjoy any of those things. In fact, it was quite the opposite. They were under the oppressive rule of the Romans. They were not secure. They were not prosperous. And even the man born blind is an indicator of they were not enjoying good health. And so these were all signs that the laws had been broken. Sometimes people ask the question, why is God so mean and nasty in the Old Testament, and yet God seems so sweet and kind and gentle in the New Testament? It's how we read the Bible, and remembering how we read and interpret the Bible. The Bible really isn't a story about God. It's a story about people. And it kind of, if you follow along the story, it traces a kind of development in the minds of people. How do people imagine God? How do people understand God? And it goes back to very ancient and very primitive times. So that in the ancient world, in the primitive world, that it was understood that God was, you didn't mess with God. God was mean and nasty. Why Why did they understand God that way? Well, interesting point. The people in the Holy Land, if we look at the natural history of the Holy Land, we see that the Jordan Valley along Israel's Jordan River, the Jordan Valley was carved by tectonic forces, by volcanoes, by earthquakes. There were lots and lots of earthquakes in that region. In fact, if you could see that there's a feature of the Earth's geology called the Great Rift Valley that goes from Turkey all the way down through the Horn of Africa. And you can look it up and Google it and look it up in Wikipedia. It's the Great Rift Valley, and it's formed by huge earthquakes. And so in the area of the Holy Land, there were earthquakes. And in the ancient world, in the minds of the ancient people, the primitive people, who's doing that? You can even read in the Psalms where the earth trembles before God, and volcanoes. And again, in the Psalms, the mountains melt like wax before the Lord. And so we see people describing earthquakes and volcanoes in terms of God. And so who's doing this? Well, it's got to be God. Why is God doing this? God must be angry. Well, why is God angry? Well, we can say the same thing today. It's something you did. So, and so they developed an understanding that you didn't mess with God. God was angry. In fact, even in the story of Moses, in the story of the Ten Commandments, you have this mountain that's belching fire and rumbling and trumpets going off. And so there's a very active volcano in the story of the Ten Commandments. So it's kind of the background to the Ten Commandments, and God's saying, look, follow this or bad things will happen. So it's the understanding that you had to appease the angry God. And how did you appease the angry God? Well, you followed the rules, and you did what God told you to do, and you didn't mess with God. So and the entire idea of the covenant, we talk about covenants. You hear that word at church. You hear that the sacrifice of Jesus was the new covenant. When the priest offers the chalice, he offers the chalice as the new and eternal covenant. So it's the understanding of the old covenant. The old covenant was the idea, if you kept the law, all the blessings that went along with the law, keeping the law, would be yours. And on the other side of that, if you broke the commandments, if you broke the law, then you would lose all those things. So when Jesus makes the mud and puts it on the man's face, he was doing work. It was the Sabbath day, and he was breaking the Sabbath. He was not supposed to do that. And of course, you know that Jesus does this on purpose. He has a purpose. He has a meaning for it all, because he's trying to get people to get beyond the law, and to move into the understanding of grace and trust and faith in a loving God, and a God who doesn't want to punish them for their sins, but rather wants to save them, rescue them from the consequences of their sinfulness. So they got on Jesus's case because Jesus is supposed to keep the commandments, and here he is, he's breaking one of the top 3 commandments. And that commandment is, remember to keep holy the Lord's day. And it comes out of the book of Exodus. I'll read from the 20th chapter of the book of Exodus, where it says, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you may labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. That's Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Now, that's the law. That's the rule. And here's Jesus doing work. And understand that the Jewish law it doesn't allow for any kind of work. But the real interesting part of the whole story was, and it's a long one, but at the beginning of the story, when Jesus and his disciples encounter the blind man, the disciples had a question. The question was, who was it that sinned? And he says, was it this man or his parents who sinned that caused him to be born blind? Good question. Jesus answers right away. He said, no, it's none of that. None of that stuff. Because Jesus represented an evolution of understanding about God, because for Jesus, God was the understanding of total and complete love that did not punish. And that's where it takes us today. You know, we're in a time now where some good Catholics are going to ask this coronavirus, this COVID-19 outbreak, why is God doing this to us? Or if we're experiencing the disease, some people might ask, why? What have I done to deserve this? And that represents that ancient understanding of God and how God deals with people. And it's a very ancient understanding. And it's in the Bible, because the Bible tells stories that reflect the ancient understanding of God. So tomorrow, interesting. Tomorrow being Monday, I know I'm trying to produce these videos for you so that we can all participate in the events of the next few weeks and perhaps the next few months. But tomorrow in the liturgical calendar, the Monday of the fourth week of Lent has an interesting gospel that I really want to share with you. So tune in for episode number 3, the story of the paralytic who was healed at Bethesda. In the meantime, pray for me. I pray for you. Care for one another. Stay healthy. Stay safe. Stay at home. Wash your hands. And maintain that safe distance from one another. Keep close. Let's greet one another, but from that safe distance, so that we can care for one another and we can help one another. God bless.